We could ask with him. Hello, Commissioner.
Hello, can you hear me?
Is Courtney coming?
You'll miss the work session, but you will be here for the board practice.
Yeah.
Can you hear me on this?
I heard something.
How about now? How about this?
Yeah, I can hear you. Good.
Okay. Six minutes to finish your stack, Mark.
That's go ahead.
You walk away. Do you have any public testimony signups, Commissioner? I mean, Teresa?
That's the way we like it. Nobody's signed up. Are we muted?
Wait till we start talking about STRs.
There it is. You can ask your question. How's this week gone, John? You're still muted.
It's going well. So I'm up and running for the for the most
Good.
part.
Good. You look good.
Thank you. It was a lot easier in person. You don't have to flip screens.
Right.
Well, Anthony is over in Hawaii right now, so.
We're paying him too much money.
Good for him.
Oh, how wonderful. I hope he's safe.
Yeah. Where is he?
He's on the big one right now. He was on Walker first, and his wife's mother lives there.
Oh,
So
cool.
I think it's fine. So,
Oh, cool.
yeah.
Oh,
So,
we would do something family-wise that we could meet each other's families.
Family picnic.
I'll bet there was such a thing at one time. No? Uh-oh.
I met
You said that.
Mark's wife and one of his daughters, so, but I haven't met him before.
I know.
No, that would be nice to get
It
everybody
really
together.
would. It really would. It would be lovely.
Jim, do you have room at your house for all of this? Or in the backyard?
But depending on how extended you go with the family, you can start getting a little crazy. My
With your babies and my babies. Yeah.
my daughter said she liked Mrs. Moore. But Mrs. Gardner was her favorite teacher.
Oh.
A lot of people say that.
And Michelle liked her too, so.
Oh,
She made a point to say that the other day, unsolicited. Mr. Thompson is excluded, right? So, yeah.
That's great.
But next week is our fifth week, right? So we're everybody go. Mm. Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, we just still got a minute. Or 30 seconds, whatever.
Watching that like a hawk. Oh, there we go. 5:00. All right, welcome, everybody. We'll get started. Work sessions are an opportunity for board members to discuss issues informally with staff and invited guests. The board encourages members of the public to attend work sessions and listen to the discussion, but there's generally no opportunity for public comment. Members of the public wishing to address the board are welcome to do so during the board's regularly scheduled meetings. First is the discussion of the formal agenda. Do know we're going to have one amendment to the consent calendar. That's item 10 is going to be taken off the consent calendar.
Oh, no.
So we'll meet
It's at the request of the fairgrounds, so
at the request of the burger.
So we don't get to talk about the skid steer?
not this time.
Not
So,
today. Any questions, comments? Okay. We'll be making that one change as we approve the agenda at the beginning of our regular meeting. We have 3 items on our agenda. Also would like to add a 4th item if we have time, and that would be homelessness, and we'd like to talk about. There's been a couple articles in the paper, and I think some movement as well on our end we'd like to discuss. So we'll add that as our 4th agenda item. But first, we will start out with a presentation from the Lower Nehalem Watershed Council. And we have Zach Mallon, who's joined us. Zach,
Howdy, how you doing? Can you hear me?
we can hear you.
That's
for being
great.
here.
Well, let me pull up the presentation and we'll get rolling along. Thanks for having me. As some of you probably well know, the Lower Nehalem Watershed Council presents on our activities for the past year on a historically it was biannual, but I've been trying to make it annual to both of the counties that I have coverage area in. So we've been trying to get this on the calendar for a little bit, and here is the 2022 year in review, though we're rapidly coming up on our 2023 one as well. So for starters, the Lower Nehalem Watershed Council's mission is to protect, preserve, and enhance the Nehalem watershed through leadership, cooperation, and education. We do that through a wide variety of activities, including research and monitoring projects, design that is required before moving into implementation for some types of projects, direct implementation of projects, a variety of collaborations, and also through our educational events, be that our speaker series or Explore Nature events. And usually I jump right from this to kind of just talking about our finances. So let's pop over there for a minute. Oop, come on. There we go. 2022 was a generally smaller year, both in our income and expenses, largely because a lot of the work we've been doing in 2022 was a lot of that design work, and a lot of the active restoration projects were mostly in a maintenance phase on. And so you'll see that a lot of our income is state, and that's because of the council capacity grant that supports my work being a larger proportion of that pie this year, as well as the fact that we're in such a big design phase, though several grants came on from the Wild Salmon Center. That's this 10% slice towards the end of the year. And so you're going to see some of these other slices, including the private, local, and the federal income slice increased quite a bit in fiscal year 2023. Additionally, when you look at our expenses, there's a bigger proportion than in some of the past years that is administrative. And again, that's because the overall pie is smaller. And so the amount of time or spending on just being an organization and operating is a little bit higher proportionally because the proportions are smaller. How it goes sometimes. Next year we have a bunch of this year we've had a bunch of funding come on. So this whole map is going to look very different in my report to you in 2023. But the fun stuff we do is in the projects. And so I'm highlighting just a few of our projects this year because we only have a few minutes to actually get through my whole presentation. So the Bandy Slough Tide Gate removal design is a project where there's a tide gate on a piece of property where it's rural residential as opposed to being agricultural property. So they don't need the tide gate. It's not protecting anything. And so we're going in to remove it for the sake of improving summer and winter fish habitat as off-channel refugia, as well as to improve some of those floodplain interaction functions that an active wetland can really serve, including mitigating flooding downstream by being another place for water to go into and settle as opposed to causing downstream issues. So it's really exciting. 3 private landowners who all have property along the slough have all agreed to have it removed. We are still in the design phase right now, under contract with a firm called Wolf Water Resources. And I'm really excited. We have a broad range of support for this project, including Fish and Wildlife, OWEB, Wild Salmon Center, NOAA, Pacific Corps, the power company who operate a power line that runs through the property, and these 3 private landowners as well. We've also been continuing to work on this Nehalem River Ranch riparian revegetation project. It's 1.5 miles of planting along the main stem Nehalem, along with a silvopasture planting, which is a planting that happens within a pasture to change the makeup of the grasses within that pasture, as well as provide other forage options and habitat for birds and insects, etc. One of the neat things about this project is that because it's on the main stem Nehalem and on a pretty low portion of it, that riparian corridor there for that 1.5 miles is predominantly knotweed presently. And we have planted through the knotweed and are currently using a crew to do manual control of the knotweed to allow our plantings to establish and grow. And once those plantings are a bit further along, we're going to be using flash grazing, bringing the cows and the goats on the property into those plantings to run through there, rapidly eat the knotweed. The rancher here has actually been training the cows to prefer knotweed to other forage. And so they'll rapidly eat the knotweed and then be moved out of that area before they damage the native plantings is the idea. So we're working on this partnership with ODFW, NRCS is involved, and obviously some OWEB funding support. And just because it's always fun to see beyond just the cows, this was from a photo I took in January when I was doing monitoring up on the site, and you can see all the little trees starting to come up, and you'll see we have a lot of conifers planted in here. And that's because a big part of this project, the impetus behind it, is the idea that a dense conifer canopy, you don't see knotweed coming up under dense conifer along the riparian zone. So if we can establish that dense conifer canopy, we're hoping that can thin out the knotweed and allow other native plants to survive in that location as well. So we also have some monitoring funds for this. And so we're doing drone flights over the top of it to monitor the vegetation, as well as my usual photo point monitoring, other on the ground monitoring. It's a neat project. Another thing we're working on is this Coal Creek riparian enhancement and in-stream work. And so it has 2 parts to it. One is the half mile of Coal Creek that we did riparian plantings on. And the other half of it is replacing this undersized residential culvert with a fish passable crossing. So the landowners approached me actually before it washed out. And then in between me submitting the grant and it getting approved, this happened here. And so luckily I already had funding and designs in line, and we were able to replace it with this bridge, which is actually a short little video. Don't mind the rushing water, but we were able to replace that culvert with a bridge. And that actually happened early in 2022. And we ended up needing to go to the Select Charitable Contribution Fund for a little bit of additional funding because of the increase in materials costs between when I wrote the grant at the end of 21 and then actually getting to implement it in 2022. And no talking about any of our work is complete without further pictures of riparian plantings. One of the big goals of this one is to have our plants that we're establishing on these bank sides here help to hold this bank in place better with their root systems once they've grown up and developed. And there's heavy willow staking along this reach as well. And also to try and reduce the density of this blackberry. And so once they get up high, form a canopy, blackberry will be reduced. Moving right along, we have several collaborations that are big and happening right now. One of the ones I'm very excited about is this Nehalem Basin Partnership, which is between myself in the Lower Nehalem and Maggie Payton in the Upper Nehalem. And then literally anybody involved in anything that touches coho habitat, be they agricultural or timber management, state agency, nonprofit, everybody. And so everyone's getting invited to the table. And the idea is that if we're all talking about what projects we want to implement and comparing resources and what each other are doing, we'll be able to find a lot more efficiencies in our work to improve the pace at which we're able to get work done. We're also in the process of applying for a OWEB FIP application, which potentially could bring up to $12 million over the course of 6 years for coho habitat restoration in the Nehalem Basin. So very exciting, could result in us doing a heck of a lot of work in between 2024 and 2030. So very exciting, lots of opportunity. And I'm really proud of the partnership that's come together because we have Weyerhaeuser as a part of it. We have Department of Forestry working with us. We're working with the Tillamook County Creamery Association, just really a broad spectrum of folks across the board getting involved in this. We're also working on something that we're calling the North Oregon Coast Watersheds Collaboration. And this reaches all the way up to the North Coast Watershed Association up in Astoria and down the coast a bit, Nicanicum Watershed Council, all the way down to the Stuckanesqua and Sand Lake. And we're also bringing back in, now that they're reforming, the Tillamook Bay Watershed Council, which is very exciting. And the goal of this project is to identify areas where we all are coming up a little short because we're all very small organizations. We have 1, maybe 2 employees. And so there are areas where we just don't have the capacity to do stuff on our own. And one way to manage that is to identify areas of collaboration and then pool our resources into that. And so we went through a SWOT process, analyzed what opportunities we wanted to work on together, and identified this little list here. And we're actually collectively working on developing a position description to try and hire an outreach person to be shared across all of our geographies to have shared messaging as well as educational opportunities for our geographies and constituencies. We have a bunch of upcoming projects, lots of fish passage, lots of wood placement, and additional tide gate removals, tide gate replacements, and some tidal wetland improvements. And you'll get to hear about that when I talk about our 2023 activities. I'm under the clock, so I can't run through everybody that has funded us or partnered with us over 2022. And this list isn't even exhaustive. So you can take a glance at it. I think you have a PDF available to you as well of the presentation, but we really appreciate everybody who's worked with us over the last year and over all the years. And now I'll open it up to some questions.
Well, thank you very much, Zach. And again, Lauren Halem, Watershed Council Coordinator, Zach Mallon. Appreciate the presentation. It's also overwhelming to see all those agencies and partners that you work with in order to complete some of these projects.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have any questions?
I do. I have what might sound like a tedious question, but I'm kind of a data nerd. Do you all track the linear mileage of restored land? Do you?
Yes.
Along Creekside is what I have primarily in mind.
Yes, we do. And one really great resource for that is actually to reach out, or not reach out to, but to check out the it's the Oregon Watershed Restoration Inventory. So it's a website maintained by OWEB that actually has Oregon-wide all the restoration projects that have gotten state funding over the years since 1996, I believe, and some projects going back even further. Personally, I have tracking in the form of I report into the OWRI database. And on a year to year, I don't tend to keep up with it because I tend to take it in, 1.5 2-mile chunks. So for instance, in 2022, we worked on, when it comes to linear mileage, 2 miles of river, right? We have that 1.5 mile project and then the 1/2 mile planting. And then beyond that, in 2024, for instance, I have several additional plantings coming up, which will probably amount to in the range of another 1/2 mile adding on, and then another 1/2 mile or more of large wood enhancement up in the Little North Fork, Nehalem River. And so a lot of it is in bits and pieces here and there. And if you're looking for a good record of all of it, definitely that OWRI database is really useful.
Thank you. I have one other question.
Yes.
It was wonderful to see your bridge construction there, and I've always wondered why we didn't do more of that. Is it because it's so much more expensive than culverts?
So it's a mixture of things, right? So one, culverts are expensive, and with material costs and all of that, labor costs going up as well, they're very expensive to replace. I initially wrote that grant with $15,000 for replacing that crossing, and it ended up costing me over 30, all told, right? And so part of it is, I think, just outright the expense. Part of it, I think, is that I'm not sure that people in our geographies are aware that watershed councils are around to help support even residential culverts in cases where there's a fish nexus, right? If there's salmonids involved, we can be around and help out. But often for a landowner, it takes longer for us to do it than it would for, that meets their needs, right? If I have to go out for grant funding, it is easily a 2 years away from implementation process as I write the grant, submit it, get funded, develop designs that meet all the permitting requirements and all the state funding requirements, and then hire people to implement it, right? And so oftentimes people will undertake it themselves, because if they undertake it themselves, it's a fraction of the cost, and they may or may not follow all the same regulations that I make sure that I do. If, you know, which works, because then they can get to their home again. And that's really important, you know? And so, yeah. But watershed councils are available for doing that kind of work. And there's a couple other residential culverts and neighborhood culverts that I'm looking at for some NOAA funding that's coming up. So National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration funding that's available. And we'll see if we can get that lined up to make it happen.
Well, I guess I'm concerned. I love the fact that, first of all, the cooperation among the watershed councils, I think, is absolutely critical. I'm also glad to hear you talking about public information, and because I think that's awfully important. And I certainly know how difficult it can be when private landowners want to be able to make improvements on their, especially on their creeks, but of course aren't willing, and often can't, spend the money to do it to permit level, but how we can help them do the best job they can, especially for fish passage. So I think that's really an important challenge for all of you folks, and I really appreciate your willing to take that on, because I think we're going to be hearing from the Upper Nail people pretty soon too.
Great, good.
And so I'm really delighted with your presentation. I just want to know who the good-looking guy is in the last slide.
Oh, so her name is Persephone, and she features heavily in a lot of my monitoring photos because she does a lot of field work with me. Thankfully, I mean, interns are low paid, which is great. She works for kibble and treats.
Well, she's very handsome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well,
Any other questions?
no, Zach, I really appreciate the presentation, appreciate all that you're doing. It was great to see some pictures and video of those projects, and continued good work to you. And I'm glad that there's good coordination amongst all the watersheds, and that's very important. I know there's a lot of work to do, a lot of barriers for fish passage that need to be overcome. So hats off to you. Thanks again.
Thank you so much.
We'll move on to the next item, which is amending the Human Services Advisory Council bylaw, Article 4, which is membership. And do we have Randy Anderson with us? Okay. Randy Anderson, our Human Services Advisory Council Chair. Randy, can you hear us? There he is. You're muted.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Okay, sorry. Our council has identified a few areas in our bylaws that we would like to recommend changes to. And the first one is Article 4, Section 2, Number 2, which currently reads, membership on the council shall not exceed 9. The council would like to amend that to read, membership on the council shall not exceed 9 voting members, because we have we've had ex officio members on our council who are not voting members. So we would like to clarify that to 9 voting members. Next is Article 4, Section 2, Number 4, which currently reads, membership shall represent recipients of services, advocates, professionals in the field, key referral sources, non-contracted provider representatives, non-voting, and lay citizens in balanced representation. Representation shall also include minority members who reasonably reflect a portion of the need for alcoholism treatment and rehabilitation services of minorities in the community, and at least one member who have mental or physical disabilities. We would like to recommend our changes to that, instead of alcoholism, to read substance use disorder, which will encompass all disorders. And then Article 4, Section 3 currently reads, upon 3 unexcused absences from scheduled council meetings by a member, the member will be contacted by the chair to see the intention of the continued service on the council. Our council would like to recommend that to read, after 2 unexcused absences from scheduled council meetings by a member, the member will be contacted by the chair to see what their intention of continued services is. After 3 unexcused absences from the scheduled council meetings by a member in 1 calendar year, the member shall surrender their appointment. And that goes to, with how it's previously worded, there's really no end game. They could have 3 unexcused absences, and then the chair will contact them. They'll say, oh, I continue, but then they continue to have absences. So we're just looking at something, an end game to it. So that's my presentation. Any questions?
Thank you, Randy. Any questions? Commissioner Toyoka? Commissioner Webb?
Wonderful. I think it's a great idea.
Sounds like everybody's in approval. Thank you, Randy. Appreciate your leadership.
Thank you, Chair Kuya. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much. We'll move on to the next item, which is priorities for the Board of County Commissioners regarding contributions to outside agencies, and Assistant County Manager Monica Steele.
Okay, and I have Randy is going to stay on here as the chair, and then Jill is also here. So we, as you all know, the board designated to the HSAC committee the duty to distribute the contributions to outside agency grants. And this is beneficial funding for services provided throughout the county. It is, there are a lot of steps to the process. And while $30,000 is a generous amount, oftentimes when the grants are being allocated, they're for amounts that are like 1,500 or 1,000. And it creates a lot of staff work, and it's also not necessarily a significant amount for the agency to be able to do something with. And so we wanted to come to the board with a few questions, and first and foremost being that, are there any specific goals this coming funding cycle for the 23-24 that the board would like the HSAC committee to focus on? So a lot of the funds that have been distributed have been for a variety of things. It's been for backpack programs. It's been for food services. It's been for eyeglasses and testing and such. And we're just trying to get a better understanding in regards to the board's strategic goals. Is there something that you would like HSAC to focus on? So when we are putting the grant applications out there, we're kind of better defining who should be applying for these funds. And our thoughts were in regards to the strategic priorities that you all have, focusing in those areas. So you have your tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 goals. And so, for example, you have childcare in tier 1, you have housing and homeless initiatives in tier 2, and then I don't see anything for tier 3. So, the HSAC committee is just trying to kind of clear up some of that. If you want to continue with the way that it has been in regards to pretty much any nonprofit agency who provides additional services in the county, we can continue with that, but we're just trying to kind of refine the process a little better. So that way it goes to our next question in regards to, rather than distributing these smaller amounts of grants, the minimum amount would be $5,000. And the last but not least, is there any further direction that you all would like to provide in regards to this grant process?
Well, I guess my only, we have our priorities of tier one for childcare. We have a childcare task force that's actually awarding grants to providers. And I don't know whether there's a way to maybe take that into account when reprioritizing some of the housing needs and homelessness.
And so that kind of goes to why we're asking
Okay.
this question is because there were childcare grant applications that were part of this process that got awarded. And so in addition to the ARPA funding that was provided, there were also childcare grants that also got funded. And so just trying to refine, like, do you want to be able to have these smaller amounts of grants, or do you want to focus? The HVAC committee, there are 3 areas that in regards to the work that they do on your behalf for advocacy is very focused on mental health, substance use, developmental disabilities. And so if you wanted them to focus in those areas, or if you wanted to continue to keep it broad in regards to food programs, homelessness, those sorts of things.
Okay. I really like the focus of substance abuse, and I mean, I think those are areas that we're not hitting. So it would seem that would be, I guess, a priority for me would be,
Okay.
to address it.
Which falls in line with your strategic goals in regards to homelessness and homelessness initiatives around some of the substance use issues.
Any other,
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts on this. One of them is that I love the work that this committee does. They, of all of the committees that I see working in the county, these folks really work hard. And they follow the grants after they award them. And I really have a lot of respect for the way the committee operates. One of the things I have always liked about it is that there were small grants, and sometimes these smaller grants show us what's not being addressed out there. And so I kind of like it. So I don't know, I almost don't want to interfere with the workings of this committee as it has been going, because they've done such a terrific job.
And I will share, and Randy can speak to this as well. One of the areas that does kind of cause a little bit of backup is, like, this year, I want to say that it's approximately 12 or 14 grants that got awarded. And so trying to follow up with that number of grants makes it difficult, because oftentimes they do like to go do site visits.
Right.
And so that site visit is essentially a meeting. And so trying to get the appropriate number of site visits in when you're distributing that many grants makes it challenging to follow.
And I've always respected the work that they do with that. I'm not sure I have any objection to having a minimum amount. It seems to me that with the cost of everything nowadays, that $1,500 doesn't pay for much other than coffee, you know.
Yeah.
So I think, and I would look to the committee to tell us what they think is the medium, is the minimum.
And I think too, and Randy can chime in if he would like, but there was a couple grants that were awarded this cycle. They were both, I believe, $1,500 grants, and they were to drug court and one of the other courts that we have, and those were $1,500. And there was a question of, would they really be able to do anything with more than $1,500? And so that's where, in situations like that, the committee might to the board with a justification as why they're recommending a less than $5,000 amount.
I think that would be excellent.
Okay, so we will go back to the committee with your recommendations around a focus of the 3 areas that are part of the HSAC bylaws and their duties and responsibility areas. And then with the recommendation of 5,000, unless there is a foreseen reason why they might recommend more.
yeah, I think that's good. Commissioner Cleopa, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Not really, just that, as long as, like you reiterate what you said, we know which, as long as it follows in with the priorities of the board. And some of the smaller grants, seemingly they have to, it's not a matter of maybe it's just a matter of management instead of, really needing that money, but maybe managing what they have. And if we can strategically place that money to other programs that would really give a boost towards the plan, I think that would be more significant.
With all that being said, staff is working. We were kind of delayed in this year's grant process. Those grants went out right at the end of the fiscal year. And so it is the HSAC intention to start the grant process in September this year. So then that way we're distributing the funds at the end of the calendar year. So then they have 6 months to be able to utilize those funds.
That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Monica, and thank you, Randy.
Thank
Appreciate all.
you, Monica and Chair Kuya.
Yeah, thank you. Please pass along our appreciation to your entire council and all the good work that you're doing, and appreciate your leadership.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I will pass that along.
We'll move on to the last item, which was added at the beginning of the work session, discussion on homelessness. And I think what precipitated this was we did write a letter to the governor requesting a different methodology on how funds would be dispersed to fund homeless initiatives in the county. I think there's been an inequity from the very beginning of this rollout of the governor's aim to combat homelessness, and we have had to jump through a lot of hoops from January to now in order to justify the need in Clatsop County. And we do have the data to support a 5% population experiencing homelessness. We get allocation proposed to us of 1%, which does not fully fund the programs that we have identified that are needed. So with that, I thought we could open it up to the county manager to kind of outline what we are doing in Clatsop County, what we have requested. It kind of falls on what we've seen about Helping Hands and the struggle that they are having. And then also there was an article from the city of Warrenton, kind of identifying locations for homeless camping. And I think we need to talk a little bit more about that as well. So county manager, I'll open it up.
Thank you, Chair Farrell, members of the board. So there's always a story behind everything, so you'll have to bear with me as I try to tell the story. So as you recall, the governor, as part of her campaign, made homelessness one of the cornerstones. And, I think for those of us that have been working within local government and certainly within Clatsop County, we had a sense that homelessness was a priority for us as well. But we also know that local governments don't have the financial wherewithal to address homelessness alone. This is where the state partnership is really vital. And this is where the state is the primary funder for homeless services. Because not only are we talking about infrastructure, buildings, staff, we're talking about programs, and then we're talking about sustainability. And so, Clatsop County is very gratified that it was a priority. We shared that with the governor when we met with her. The problem was, and this is not, I have found, a unique problem now that I'm sitting in the Clatsop County chair, not the Washington County chair, is that this process from the very get-go was framed in a way that was going to be a disadvantage to certain rural counties. And so, as you might recall, there was an early conversation about using continuum of care areas to be the framework that then drives the legislation, that drives the funding. When you look at the continuum of care counties, there's 7, or there's 8, I think total, but 7 of them are more urban. And then there's 1 that has 26 counties in it that is rural. And so the 7 urban continuum of care got treated differently than the 1 that represents 26 rural counties. And I'm just going to read off what what the continuum of care counties are. It's the Shutes, Crook, Jefferson, Clackamas, Jackson, Lane, Multnomah County, Marion, Polk, and Washington. The balance of the state is anybody that I just didn't mention. The problem is that when I started looking at the data, it was evident that if you use this continuum of care framework, you are disadvantaging counties. And what we're talking about here is that there's roughly 25,000 roughly. Actually, it's probably even more that is going to these continuum of care counties, and there's 27 million that is coming to the balance of the state counties. So, but when you look at it, out of the top 6 counties in the state regarding homeless population, which were number 6, which represents 60% of the homeless population in the state, 2 of the counties are not continuum of care counties. So if you look at the top 18, which is 93% of the homeless population in the state comes from 18 counties. So half of the counties are supporting 93% of the homeless population. Out of those 18 counties, 11 of them are not continuum of care counties. And so it just shows you that there's no way that you can really deal with the homeless issue the way that they've structured this program. The continuum of care counties only represent 62% of the homeless population, but they're getting the bulk of funding. The rest, 32%, sits in these mostly rural counties. And what that means is that, just as an example, Clatsop County right now has been identified for about 1% of the overall state funding, which is what our population is. But as Chair Coelho mentioned, we have 5% of the homeless population. And I will say we had 5% back in 2017-18 too. So, but they are currently allocating $1,638 roughly per homeless individual in the county. Washington County and Clackamas County have less homeless numbers than what Clatsop County does. Washington County, I'm just using them as an example, has been allocated already almost $8 million, which is over 9,000 per homeless individual, and we're at 1,638. And they have an opportunity for more allocations. We are capped at really this 27 million by the legislation. So the legislation, which is House Bill 5019, identified these categories and what the funding levels were going to be. And the 2 categories are continuum of care counties and the balance of the state counties. All of that is hardwired in the legislation. There's nothing that the governor, there's nothing that OHCS or anybody else can really do, except for within that 27 million that the balance of the state counties have been allocated, trying to move the chairs around a little bit between 26 counties. So we're having a lot of conversations with the state, but the reality is this disproportionate lack of funding that's coming to the balance of the state counties cannot be rectified by the state. So we're having a conversation with OHCS tomorrow, and while we accept the fact that this is kind of hardwired at this point, this inequity, and I do see it as an inequity, is that it is hardwired. We need to make an ask of the governor to, during the short session, propose a bill that would fund these 11 balance of the state counties at a level that would actually be representative of the level that the other counties are being funded. If you just took the money that was identified in the legislation for just emergency shelters and rapid rehousing, if you just took those two, and you proportionally distribute it based upon need, we would be getting multiple millions of dollars that would actually be more in line with what the need is. And so even if they would have approached this whole thing differently, and they would have said, we're not going to use a continuum of care framework, we're going to look at this and say 93% are within 18 counties. Let's have the balance of the homeless funding go to those 18 counties, and then the balance of the state would go to the other 18 counties. And then do it based upon percent of the homeless population. Then we would have received money, we would have received 5% of the allocated funds instead of 1% now. And that would have been a lot fairer, and that would have treated all 18 of the counties that are representing 93% of the problem equitably. Right now, we and the other 11 that are part of the 18 counties that represent the 93% are not being treated equitably. Almost all of us have a higher percent of the homeless population than we are getting of the available funding. And that's just not right. It's not right to have some counties receive more funding than the population that they're bearing, and others are so dramatically less. And I don't know how they don't see that as a problem and they don't want to fix it, but the reality is they can't fix it right now. So I accept that they can't, but what I would hope is that the governor would support some additional funds for these counties so that it makes it more of an equal platform as we move forward. Because what we have, and I just want to talk about some of the attributes, is we have an amazing MAC group at the county level that is working on this very collaboratively in a great partnership, and includes some of our most critical, safety net providers. We've come up with a plan. It's a plan that would serve hundreds of folks in the community. I think it's a model for the other MACs. It's an $8 million plan. We have an $8 million problem. It's a unanimous agreement what the problem statement is. If you give us 1.5 million, or you up it to 1.75 million, we still have a huge funding gap. And if we got 5% of all the funding, we'd be getting about $8 million. So that's where I just feel like there's a continuing story here that rural counties are not being seen. And they used a decision-making framework that was a disadvantage to us from the start. And it's just something that I feel compelled that we continue to tell our story, because when you look at just the numbers, it's a huge disservice to Clatsop County to get such a small portion of the funding. So we're going to meet with OHCS. There's ongoing conversations with the governor's office. But literally at this point, all that we can ask for is eke out whatever you possibly can for the county, and then go back to the legislature in the short session and ask them for additional resources. So I just wanted to present that and talk about it a little bit. I want to thank staff. They've done a great job putting together a lot of information, helping us with the infographics and the letter. But it's something that I hope the state will finally see, that the approach that they took from the beginning was the problem. So,
and County Manager, what you request, this is a reasonable request that we are making. We certainly do have to follow up with the request to be covered for legislation. The easiest thing would have been to allocate per capita, you have to go to links in order not to do it. I mean, that was the funny thing from the very beginning, is that there was all kinds of different metrics that were being used, but not the one that really mattered. So yes, I do appreciate all of your hard work on this, and Assistant County Manager Monica Steele and our Emergency Director Justin Gibbs and all the entire administrative team and staff that have been trying to put the data together and put the plan together. And then you mentioned the MAC. We do have a robust plan for addressing homelessness in Clatsop County, but
Yeah,
it would be
well,
funded simply by that allocation.
yeah, and part of what we're asking them now, because what they've asked us to do is basically go back and really dismantle what our program was. So first they told us to develop the program, so we did. It's an $8 million program, but now the funding is so much less that they're saying, well, let's deconstruct it and let's come up with a plan for the money available. What we've said and what I believe is, would be more appropriate is just to give us the money and let us fund elements of the plan that we think fit best for Clatsop County, because we know best, our partnerships know best. Let us do that. The irony is that in the legislation, it doesn't call for the balance of the state counties to come up with a plan that is approved by the state, but it does require that for the continuum of care counties. And so, but the requirement of us too. And I think at some point, they just have to recognize that these counties put a lot of time and energy, which we don't have a lot of staff time and energy, and certainly the nonprofits don't have a lot of time and energy, is that we have put it in. At this point, let us receive the money and let us get down to what we can do. And so that's part of what we'll be talking to them tomorrow is don't make us reconstruct and then create a $1.5 million program. Give us the $1.5 million and we'll figure out with the partners how best to spend.
Exactly.
So-
I hope you can be, I guess, maybe, I don't know what you need from us. But I hope that the board can stand behind you very firmly on this. I don't know what it takes. I mean, but
I will tell you as soon as we have the conversation about
Okay.
what it might take. I think that the letter and the infographic was all helpful.
Oh, it was one.
And we shared
Yeah.
the spreadsheet with them also. And so, I mean, that's all important. And as we work through this, it may take the board,
Absolutely.
weighing in.
I think we would, I can't imagine anybody on the board who would not be very willing.
Yeah, you can count on the board being very active in this and supporting our efforts because we understand the inequity and we want to make sure that we rectify.
We're made as hell.
Yeah.
And so is OHCF completely in charge of writing these checks?
They are the ones that are making the allocations right now. So, and that's why what we've been told is if the process changes or the formula, it really has to go from OHCS to the governor. But the reality is it's in legislation.
Exactly.
And
I
so,
think we can do. And
so there is nothing that they can do. So instead of pushing that rock up the hill, which is more symbolic, I just want to say, yes, we understand you can't do a lot now, but what are the options to remedy it? So.
the other issue that you make really, really well on a lot of other issues that I hope you will include in this one is that in rural places, we don't have the existing capacity for implementing programs like this. I think, however, in Clatsop County, we really do have a remarkable capacity because of our partnerships with, and because of the way we fund, because we've always taken our mental health funds very, very seriously. We have intentionally built up the strength of organizations like CBH, and our own public health department is, I believe, much stronger than a lot of rural counties is in providing mental health services and our overall understanding. And so we do, I've heard you say so many times, we can't just ramp up. We don't have the staff to just ramp programs up. You could give us $100 million, but we'd have trouble shoveling it out the door. But in this case, we really do have an infrastructure strength that I don't think a lot of other counties have.
And I think we've been recognized by the state that's been working, the state staff that are working on the MAC plans that, I mean, we do have capacity when you look at the entire continuum of resources, meaning nonprofit organizations, other partners, that we can do this. And I think it's a testament to everybody that we have a plan that will make a significant difference into the lives of those that are most in need in our community. And that's what I always say is, I mean, these are the folks that are most in need. There's nothing worse than the people that are working on these issues every day to come up with a plan and have the deck stacked against them from the beginning and not have any chance to actually implement the plan.
That's one.
And so, and it's all based upon fairness and equity. And so that's, you know, that's something that I just think, I mean, I value the state partnership. We need to work closely because we're working on with them on so many issues. We need them.
Yeah.
But we need them to stand up for us too. And so we're going to keep working this, and, you know, we're obviously going to do it in the uniquely Clatsop County way. But I hope that at some point we can just get recognition about how we would like to do this moving forward. So,
And also our partnership with our cities,
yeah.
because I don't see a lot of that in other rural counties, the way I do here.
I agree.
So to me, our partnerships with rural,
You can come up, Monica.
oh, I'm sorry, I
Oh, I'm sorry.
thought you were talking to me.
You just have 4 more minutes, and I just wanted to make sure you were gonna touch on the Warrington situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just, real quickly, Commissioner Toya, do you have anything you wanted to add? We had a couple things else that we wanted to touch on real quick.
No, I 100% agree with everything the county manager said, and back him fully.
China.
So the other topic is there was an article in the newspaper about city of Warrenton who's been identifying locations to have camping in the city, which is a very city requirement, trying to identify. City of Astoria has addressed this, city of Earhart has been, and city of Seaside has. So city of Warrenton has done that. There was an article about a location out by the North Coast Business Park. And there was a couple of streets that they have been talking about of allowing camping along the public right of way. Little challenge is that the streets that have been identified are not city streets, but they're county roads. And so, so that's something that we're discussing with the city because obviously having them be county roads makes it a different issue. And so those discussions will be ongoing. I will make myself available to meet with the mayors and Chair Quayla to talk a little bit further about this camping issue. Like, as I mentioned, a lot of the cities have been addressing it. But I'm happy to have that discussion with folks. And so, and you know, part of our focus has been on the longer term solutions. Getting these shelter beds is part of the solution, and having shelter beds throughout the county, both in South County, North County, has always been part of the strategy. So, so we will follow up, but you know, there was an article, and we're working through some confusion about location and about jurisdiction. So we will work through those issues. So.
Yeah, and then we've got 2 minutes. I think the only last thing we can mention is that Helping Hands article, kind of, one of the quotes in there was that counties and others are not helping with funding. And actually, Clatsop County is helping to the tune of $190,000 given. So I think that that's something we need to emphasize, that we are, you know, we identified ARPA funding that could be of assistance to Helping Hands. We certainly want to see them continue and be able to provide that service. But yeah, we're doing our part.
Yeah, I think that, you know, part of the Helping Hand story is that they do work in various counties, and some counties are more actively engaged in supporting them, and then others have not been. And so sometimes it comes across as all counties are not, and that's not really.
And they also have a private person
Yeah.
who has given them enormous amount of money.
And so, and I do, and the state, we do know, has been working with them, and they have a strategy to help fund ongoing operations. And so, so I think those beds will be secured at least for some period of time. And, you know, maintaining the existing beds it is really vital. I mean, we can't add beds and then lose beds. And so, so they both have to go in a synchronous way. So
Okay, well, we're right at 6, so let's transition to our dais and we can continue.
Wait, something here.
I'm sorry, I don't do a very good job.
Open the window so that we can see and absorb the joy.
Yeah.
Anthony, can you hear us? Oh, you're muted.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yes.
we can hear you.
Perfect, thank you.
Commissioner Toyoka, you all ready to go?
All set.
Okay, the Board of Commissioners as the governing body of Clatsop County, all county service districts for which this body so acts, and as the Clatsop County Local Contract Review Board is now meeting in regular session. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
to stand one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yes.
That's where that time delay gets us. Clerk of the board, can we have the roll call?
Chair Cleela,
Here.
Vice Chair Banks. Here. Commissioner Toyoka,
Here.
Commissioner Webb. Here. Commissioner Thompson.
And Commissioner Thompson is excused this evening. Okay, we had an opportunity to review the agenda at our work session. There is one amendment. We're going to pull item 10 from the consent calendar this evening, so we'll amend the agenda accordingly.
I move to approve the agenda with amendment.
Second that.
Moved and seconded to approve the agenda as amended. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. First item is the proclamation, World Suicide Prevention Day, on page 36 of our agenda. And Allison Weisenhunt,
Columbia Memorial Hospital Director of Behavioral Health and Care Management is here. Welcome, Allison.
For having me. So yes, I'm Allison Weisenhunt. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I've spent the majority, actually all of my career in the healthcare industry, and it's been about 20 years. I've been out here on the coast for 10, and I have helped build some programs in both the local hospitals to help folks who are struggling with behavioral health crisis and suicide ideation. Suicide has become a huge problem. It's always been an issue, but it's become a huge problem. The lifeline that we have here, it's actually a nationwide 988 number. It's a crisis line. Between 2005 and 2021, there have been over 24 million calls nationwide to that line. And that's certainly not capturing everyone who has thoughts of suicide. Those are just the folks who pick up the phone and call. Between 2016 and 2021, Oregon's lifeline has seen an increase of 116% in those calls. Unfortunately, I've had my own personal experience with someone who's died by suicide. I've also worked with a patient here in this county who's died by suicide. So I really appreciate that you guys are looking at this proclamation.
Yeah, thank you, Allison. Any questions, comments? I have the pleasure of working with Allison at Columbia Memorial Hospital. I'll just say that she's built up a tremendous team of social workers and addressed a real growing need of or in crisis, behavioral health crisis, and we really appreciate all that you've done, Allison.
I'd be interested in talking to you sometime about pediatrics.
And I'd love that.
So anyhow, I move to approve the resolution and order proclaiming September 10th, 2023 to be World Suicide Prevention Day, and authorize the chair to sign and then read the proclamation.
Have a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the resolution and order proclaiming September 10th, 2023 to be World Suicide Prevention Day, and authorize the chair to sign and read the proclamation. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? The motion carries. The Board of Clatsop County Commissioners in the matter of proclaiming September 10th, 2023 to be World Suicide Prevention Day. Whereas suicide is a leading cause of death in the United States, responsible for more than 48,000 deaths in 2021. And whereas suicide rates in 2021 were 36% higher than in 2000. And whereas men were 4 times as likely to die by suicide than women. And whereas suicide was among the top 9 leading causes of death for people ages 10 to 64, and the second leading cause of death for people ages 10 to 14 and 20 to 34. And whereas suicide is a serious public health problem that can have long-lasting effects on individuals, families, and communities. Whereas 889 Oregonians died by suicide in 2021, and with each death, they left behind a grieving family, of friends, and a community. And whereas everyone can help prevent suicide by learning the warning signs, promoting prevention and resilience, and committing to social change. And whereas the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is available and free for talk or text if you are having mental health or are worried about a loved one who may need crisis support. And now therefore be it hereby resolved that the Clatsop County Board of Commissioners does hereby proclaim Sunday, September 10th, 2023 as World Suicide Prevention Day in Clatsop County, and invites all community members to join in this day of observance by raising awareness, reducing stigma around suicide, and encouraging well-informed action. Dated this 23rd day of August, 2023, Board of Clatsop County Commissioners.
Thank you.
Next item is National Preparedness Month proclamation, and Justin Gibbs.
He's not online.
Okay. Okay, County Manager.
Oh, excuse me, he just now joined, so let me
Oh, perfect.
allow him.
We'll turn it over to Justin Gibbs, Emergency Management Director.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Our department is requesting approval of the proposed resolution and order proclaiming September 2023 as Preparedness Month in Clatsop County. Preparedness Month was originally created by the Federal Emergency Management Agency in response to the tragic events of September 11th, 2001, in order to educate the public on how to prepare for emergencies. This September marks the 22nd anniversary of the attacks, and the 2023 National Preparedness Month campaign will focus on preparing older adults for disaster, specifically older adults from communities that are disproportionately impacted by all hazard events. The Clatsop County Emergency Management Department encourages everyone to participate in activities to get their families, businesses, neighborhoods, and communities prepared. In recognition of Preparedness Month, Clatsop County, along with other community partners, will host a county-wide readiness fair on Saturday, September 30th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. at Camp Rylea's Warrior Hall. That concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Any questions, comments? Ready for the question?
I move to approve resolution and order proclaiming September 2023 as National Preparedness Month and authorize the chair to read and then sign the proclamation.
Second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the resolution and order proclaiming September 2023 as National Preparedness Month and authorize the chair to read then sign the proclamation. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. All
Aye.
those opposed? Okay, motion carries. In the matter of proclaiming September 2023 to be National Preparedness Month, whereas the Federal Emergency Management Agency announced the 2023 National Preparedness Month theme, Preparing for Older Adults, and this campaign creates an opportunity for Clatsop County residents to join citizens from across the United States in preparing for any type of emergency. And whereas the best way to improve community resiliency from disasters is for individuals to proactively take responsibility for preparing their families and communities, as preparedness significantly increases the chance of survival and return to normalcy following a disaster. And whereas Clatsop County Emergency Management partners with federal, state, local, tribal, territorial, private, and volunteer agencies to educate individuals on local hazards, how to prepare for them. And whereas Clatsop County Emergency Management encourages individuals to take action through public education events like Get Ready Clatsop County and volunteer programs such as Community Emergency Response Teams, or CERT, and the Auxiliary Communication Service. Now, therefore, be it hereby resolved that the Clatsop County Board of Commissioners does hereby proclaim September 2023 as National Preparedness Month in Clatsop County and encourages the community to observe this in September 2023, dated this 23rd day of August 2023, Clatsop County Board of Commissioners. Thank you very much, Director Gibbs.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.
You as well. And next is business from the public. This is an opportunity for anyone to give a 2-minute presentation on any item on the agenda, except for public hearings or any topic of county concern that is not on the agenda. Clerk of the board, are there any members of the public signed up to speak remotely?
No, there are not.
There are not. All right. Is there anyone in the room that is signed up to speak?
No.
I can mumble that out. Okay, we'll go ahead and close business from the public. Move on to the consent calendar. We had one amendment to the consent calendar, which was item 10 to be taken off. Any other discussion or questions? Okay.
I move to approve the consent calendar with said amendment.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar with amendment. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. Commissioner reports. We'll start with Commissioner Toyoka.
Well, good evening, everyone. I don't have much to report, except I appreciate the grace of, since my absence for quite a while, and had some great meetings with Commissioner Quayla and County Manager to help get me back up to speed and discuss some of the future programs and agendas we'd like to establish. So hopefully I'll be back up to speed fully soon and, be a functioning commissioner for this county. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Toyoka. Good to see you. Commissioner Webb?
Yes, thank you. The most exciting thing that happened to me this week was my attendance at the fly-in, the Port of Portland sponsored at the airport. It was really a wonderful event. It was open, the Coast Guard was there, of course. I was disappointed that they didn't let us inside their buildings. They just let us climb all over, and our kids to climb all over the helicopters. Except it was also interesting that as a part of that, one of their helicopters was not there because it was on its way to Southern California to help with the hurricane that was there. And so it was, very much a always in action, semper paratus type deal. I thought one of the coolest things about it was that they had about, I think I counted something like 12 small light plane, what we used to call light planes. Do you still see it anymore? Small planes that people flew in for the day, and it was really fun to see how many different kinds of small planes there are. They were a huge hit with everybody, including the kids. Some of them were really entertaining. My favorite plane of the day was a couple from the state of Washington who have restored a plane that used to be used here at the Coast Guard station prior or at the beginning of World War II as what they called a pre-flight school, where it was a very small plane, a two-seater, one behind the other, very small. And the man who was very proudly the owner of the plane said that what they used to use it for was to give young people kind of a preparatory training and see if they could handle this, then they'd send them to Pensacola, which is where the Coast Guard Flight School is. I assume it was then too, but that was a lot of fun, and he was very proud of his plane, and it was gorgeous. It was pristine. It was very well maintained. So anyway, it was very cool. It was really, really a great event. I think it's always worthwhile bringing our citizens out to the airport to show them that we have a very viable, working airport. And the only thing I was disappointed in it was that they couldn't talk any of the big guys who fly in, Costco and some of the big retailers, who come in with some pretty large planes. But anyway, it was a great event. I thought it was a lot of fun, and it was great to see so many kids there. And that's all I have. That's all I have.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Commissioner Webb. Thanks.
Well, I didn't have any exciting meetings last week. I get to talk about my favorite topic, which is childcare, on Friday with an investigative reporter and a couple other folks that from our community, Eva and Dan. And so that'll be exciting. It's my favorite topic. So I get to celebrate us and all the good things that we're doing, but also remind folks that just because we're doing great things doesn't mean that we don't need further assistance. So that'll be, I'm looking forward to that. I went on vacation. I haven't been on vacation in forever, but I went on a vacation. It was interesting though, because it's fire season in my household. And so my husband got home, he went off call. At midnight, we went on vacation within like 6 hours because it was running a risk otherwise. And on vacation, there were 2 fires surrounding us. And so my kids got to watch the water drops, which is very sad to see, but also very exciting for them to finally understand what Dad does. So yeah. It was kind of a full circle, interesting situation. Idaho is a wonderful place to visit and very peaceful, actually. Surprisingly so. I don't know how to pronounce it. Is it Coeur d'Alene? Coeur d'Alene?
Coeur d'Alene.
It's a tourist community, but it is quiet. So I was a little interested about that. But anyhow, yeah, just went on vacation. I get to talk about childcare and school starting. And so that's why I'm sliding into home plate tonight. So I was excited to meet all my students tonight before this meeting. So anyhow, yeah, about it.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad you were able to get on vacation.
That's awesome. If you haven't been to Silverwood, you need to go.
Wow.
Take the kids. It was fun.
I don't have anything to report. I like the homeless. Leave it at that and turn it over to County Manager.
Chair Quayla, members of the board, just real quickly, in the Friday update, I did mention the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management has a 60-day public comment period. I've had conversations with some board members about potentially putting together a draft of public comments for your board's review prior to the end of the period, which will be in mid to late October. So it gives us time to maybe bring somebody in to give a little bit of background and context for the work that has been done, and then prepare a public comment before too late. So besides that, we're working on broadband still, having some exciting conversations with the various folks. I think we're actually going to be able to make progress on that, and I'll look forward to coming and briefing your board as we just have a couple more dominoes that need to fall first. So that's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you, County Manager. A lot of things that the County Manager's office is engaged in. We appreciate all your hard work. Next item is the business agenda, and that's the ARPA funding agreement with Northwest Oregon Housing Authority on page 111. I'm turning it over to County Manager Don Boone to present on this.
Chair Quayla, members of the board, as you will recall, we had a work session about this item where we had Jim Evans from NOHA presenting an overview of the Owens Adair 2 project. The project is still moving forward. In my conversation with Jim today, they have not received permits yet, but there's been a peer review of the geotechnical study that they're waiting for. So staff has put together a funding agreement. This is part of the $7.8 million that was distributed by the federal government as part of the ARPA funding. Pre-development grants are part of the allowable expenses for the ARPA funding for affordable housing. And so the request is that your board consider this pre-development grant of $125,000 to NOAA for the Owens Adair 2 project.
Thank you, County Manager. Do we have any questions, comments at this time? Commissioner Webb?
Yeah, one of the things, after having spent several years putting together development projects for low-income housing, I'm very sensitive to the issue that pre-development projects can be characterized in all kinds of different ways. But in general, they are the most needed to get a project really going, because you can't get tax incentive financing until you've got all this done, until you've got these hundreds of thousands of dollars of drawings completed, and until you've got control of the property, and until you've done your geotech, and some of the other things that are really difficult to get funding for are things like in our situation here in the current project that we're funding with NOHA, is that we're in a historic district, and so anytime you turn dirt, you have to call an archaeologist and a historian, et cetera. So there are a lot of softer costs that go into pre-development. And even though NOHA came to us with an ask that was far larger than we were able to accommodate, we did. I do feel certain that we are in fact funding pre-development costs for this project, and so I think it's yeah, and there seems to be a little bit of a softening of public opposition to the project for a couple of other reasons. So I think it's a great thing, and it's a wonderful way for us to be able to access to me, something like this is almost a down payment for a federally funded and assisted program for us. So it's kind of nice for us to be able to come up with, this is something that maybe we can keep in our future considerations of affordable housing, that pre-development is something that is appropriate and often very needed for the public sector to come up with. So, so hopefully this is the beginning of a lot of other projects.
No, thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments, questions? Commissioner Toyoka?
Just had a question on the geotech. Was there a timeline on that?
Commissioner Toyoka, I'm just going off of what I heard from Jim Evans, is they believe that review process should be culminating in the next couple of weeks. So,
Any inkling? Because I know it was a contentious, could be problematic. Was there any inclination of that going, any problems?
I haven't heard anything from the city in terms of any problems. And I guess over the next couple of weeks, if there are, we will certainly hear about it. And, if for some reason this project didn't go forward, then obviously the ARPA dollars would be coming back to us. So.
Thank you.
Good question. Any other?
I mean, I just have a comment. I'm grateful to hear that the public perception is the wrong word. Public feelings are getting better, I guess, is the best way to describe that. I don't know how to verbalize that, but I'm glad to hear that. So,
Are we ready for a motion?
Wes, go ahead.
I move the approval of, you'd think by all this time I should do this, be able to do this. I move to approve the ARPA funding agreement with NOAA for a pre-development grant in the amount of $125,000 for the Owens Adair 2 project.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the ARPA funding agreement with NOAA for a pre-development grant in the amount of $125,000 for the Owens Adair 2 project. All those in favor signify with an aye. Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next, we have a public hearing on ordinance 23-11, exclusive farm use zone amendment, page 118, and Ian Sisson, our senior planner, is here. We also have County Counsel Anthony Pope. Do we need to do anything in advance, County Counsel, or can we move into the staff report?
We just, at some point, we do need to read the title, but we can do that after the staff report.
Okay. Thank you, County Counsel. I'll turn it over to Ian.
Thank you, Chair Quila and members of the board. So again, this amendment has come before you in a work session last month, as well as a first reading of the ordinance a couple of weeks ago, and was recommended to you for approval by the Planning Commission. The effect of this ordinance would be to reschedule the alteration, restoration, or replacement of a lawfully established dwelling in the EFU, exclusive farm use zone, from a type 2 conditional use to a type 1 development permit. And that would have the effect of reducing the application fee from $1,200 down to $85, and would also significantly reduce the time that it takes for us to review and issue those permits. So happy to answer any questions that might still be out there about this one.
Thank you, Ian. Any questions? Comments? Okay, County Counsel, would you read the ordinance by title?
Yep. This is ordinance number 23-11 in the matter of an ordinance amending the Clatsop County Land and Water Development and Use Code to allow alteration, restoration, or replacement of a lawfully established dwelling under a type 1 procedure in the exclusive farm use zone.
Thank you, County Counsel. Are we ready for the motion?
Yeah.
Okay.
I move to approve ordinance 2311, exclusive farm use zone amendment.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve ordinance 23-11, exclusive farm use zone amendment. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Excuse me, Chair Quayla. I just wanted to confirm that there was nobody from the public who wanted to make a public comment for this today.
Sure. Do we have anyone that is here either virtually or in the room that would like to provide public comment? Okay, not seeing any. Right.
Thank you.
County Council. Ordinance 23-12, Geologic Hazards Overlay Amendment on page 125, and Senior Planner Ian Sisson.
Thank you, Chair Quayla, members of the board. This ordinance would amend our Geologic Hazards Overlay District, which we use to satisfy statewide Planning Goal 7, which deals with natural hazards. Our Geologic Hazards Overlay addresses various geologic hazards across the county and requires applicants for development in identified hazard areas to obtain a geologic hazard report, which then they can use to obtain a geologic hazard permit. And we have determined as staff that it would be appropriate to provide some exemptions to that permit requirement. So we've discussed this list of exemptions with you a couple of times now, first in a work session and then in a first hearing a couple of weeks ago. And the ordinance was recommended to you by the Planning Commission for approval with a couple of changes. Those changes are now reflected in the version of the ordinance you have before you. Happy to go over any questions about those that you might have. And then the other thing that this ordinance would do is that it would extend the period geologic hazard reports are valid from 2 years up to 5 years.
Okay. Thank you very much, Senior Planner Sisson. Do we have any questions or comments? And County Council, I'll go ahead and ask you to provide the reading by title only.
This is ordinance number 23-112 in the matter of an ordinance amending the Clatsop County Land and Water Development and Use Code to provide exemptions to the geologic hazard permit requirement for certain activities in the Geologic Hazard Overlay District.
Thank you, County Council. And we'll go ahead and open it up. Is there anyone that would like to provide public comment on ordinance 23-12? And then County Clerk, we have not received anybody that would like to provide public comment. Okay. We'll go ahead and move to the motion.
May I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Don't we make a statement that this is the second hearing and that with the approval tonight, this becomes approved ordinance?
So, yeah,
In the motion, it states.
it's approved ordinance 23-12, Geologic Hazards Overlay Amendment. Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
I guess I'm used to the lawyer saying it.
Yeah.
I move to approve ordinance 2312, Geologic Hazards Overlay Amendment.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded to approve ordinance 23-12, Geologic Hazards Overlay Amendment. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, all those opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you, County Council, and thank you very much, Senior Planner Ian Sisson. We don't have anything else on the agenda this evening, so do we have anything for the good of the order?
It is 6:32.
All right, we'll go ahead and adjourn. Thank you, everybody.